Hello, and welcome to the NISFA Open Doors Film Panel Series. I'm Professor Jeffrey Wisotsky, and we're coming to you live from the studios of Bronx Community College. It's a great time to be a film student in New York State. Thanks to Governor Cuomo's highly successful production tax credit program, New York's film industry is growing and thriving. And that means new production-related jobs are being created every day. Today on the program, we're talking to a distinguished panel of local, regional, and state film office representatives. We will discuss how their offices are essential to your filmmaking success and how they can help you achieve your vision. Besides me is David Moy, the supervisor of field operations at the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Next is Deborah Markowitz, who created the Nassau County Film Office 31 years ago and continues to run it to this day. And lastly, Barry Sermon, the Deputy Director of Tourism and Film in the Westchester County Executive's Office. Welcome to the program. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. So our film students in the audience and students watching this program online, they want to know how local, regional, and state film offices are essential to their filmmaking success. How can you help filmmakers achieve their vision? Let's start with David.
So our office permits anything that requires use of city property, whether it's shooting on a city street or just even just parking your equipment trucks. And if you have scenes where you need to control traffic or you have actors in police uniform or gunfire, we have a unit from the NYPD that's specifically dedicated to production. And that's free of charge. So that's one of our selling points of New York City. If you have a concern, a big scene, we'll go over it with you some weeks in advance, days in advance, and we'll figure out the logistics of how to make it work.
Deborah?
Okay, well, it's basically the same thing, except our police aren't free, but we also will help you with permits for anything that is Nassau County owned. In Nassau County, however, there are 66 incorporated villages, I believe 5 towns and 2 cities. So if it's not something we own, we'll send you to the proper entity that will run the area that you want. And we also have a database of different houses and whatnot, private houses. This is generally for bigger filmmakers because they're usually a lot more money, but they can look at the houses or we can send them to different areas. We also run the Filmmakers Connection meetings once or twice a year for local filmmakers where they can come and network, and we'll have a different speaker from different areas of the production community. And pretty much we troubleshoot, we kind of save your butt when you get in trouble, things like that. So that's Nassau County.
Barry?
I'd like to back up a little bit from the permitting process and say we try to help filmmakers from the very beginning in identifying locations anywhere in our region that can be useful to their creative process. So whether you're looking for a county property or a city property or a village or town property where you need to get a location rental agreement from that government entity, or you're looking for private property, we know our areas and we know people, resources, places that can help you become a more effective filmmaker by finding the right spots where not only we get the right looks that you need, but also the right cooperation that you need. So my advice, in addition to what my colleagues have said here, is talk to us early, because we can very often steer you in ways that will make the process down the road much easier for you. And yes, you do have to get permits. I'm sure we'll talk about that some more. And our job is to help you with that.
Next question comes up in all of our production classes, and are film permits really necessary? Why does a filmmaker need one? And does a filmmaker risk being shut down by your offices without one? And we'll start with David.
So for our office, anytime you film on city property, you use city property, you need to get a permit, except if you're just using a handheld camera or your camera's on a tripod and you don't exert exclusive use of any city property, which means you just have a handheld camera, you do your scene, and other pedestrians are free to walk behind you. You don't ask pedestrians to stop for rolls, and then you don't need a permit. Basically, it's for liability. Like we need, if you film and there's an accident, then if you have a permit from us, we require general liability insurance before you can get a permit. So for liability reasons, we need you to get a permit if you fall outside that simple category of handheld, being handheld.
And Deborah, in your office?
Yeah, again, it depends. I mean, I can speak to this as both the film commissioner and a filmmaker, since I do both. You know, some cities require permits, some don't. For instance, I know of a filmmaker who shot at a private home in Roslyn, I won't mention her name, and they wanted $500 a day for a permit fee from the village, even though there wasn't even a truck on the street, there was nothing on the street. So said filmmaker didn't tell the village never knew. So there's certain things like that, if you're all inside, if you don't have any trucks, if you are not bothering the neighbors, if there's nothing you are doing that's going to call any attention to you. I'm not going to say you can't do it, because it's not my job to say that, but I know it's been done. If you are filming in an area, a more public area, right after 9/11, somebody filmed a feature on the property of the East Meadow Water District. And I happen to know the filmmakers who called me up and said, they're calling the police, help, they want to put us in jail. And I had to speak to the person who was in charge of the property and just said, they're filmmakers, I know them, they're not blowing up your building, you can let them go, because people were very scared back then. And same as I had to talk somebody out of a movie with Harrison Ford, I don't remember which one, but they were scouting on a very, very affluent, exclusive island off of Long Island, and I had to let them know that it's not, you're not even allowed to put something in anybody's mailbox to solicit a location. So I had to really kind of beg them and schmooze them to not even do that. So you're supposed to have a permit. You should have a permit if you're expending any kind of investment in equipment and crew and cast. You don't want to be shut down in the middle of your film, because and they will do that. So you do need to be careful.
And Barry, how does it work in your office?
Well, I think that's an important cautionary tale that Deborah told, that the permit, in a sense, is a form of insurance for your production. It's insurance that if somebody comes along and questions your right to be there, that you've got something official that says, yes, we do have a right to be there, we can do our work, and we can do it efficiently and effectively. I would not count on the fact that you're not going to bother the neighbors, because guess what? You're going to bother the neighbors. There's going to be a light, a sound, a vehicle, something you don't anticipate at all that's going to cause somebody to say, hey, what's going on here? Whether it's in somebody's house, whether it's at a public facility. And frankly, the security concerns that Deborah mentioned after 9/11, they still persist today. There are certain places where I'm not allowed to have somebody film because it's considered critical infrastructure by Homeland Security Department, and I'm sure she's got instances of that too. So that goes back to what I said initially. Come talk to us first, because we can save you these kinds of hassles. Do get a permit. In Westchester County, to encourage all of you, we offer deeply discounted permitting fees. Typically, to shoot for up to 12 hours in one of our county parks, for example, will cost you $75. It's not a lot of money in the scheme of things, but like I said, the level of security you get by having that assurance is well worth it.
So I have another question for all of you. What is the hardest part, and what is the most rewarding part of your jobs? And we'll start with David. David?
I think you'll see I have some clips coming up just to get a scene that the filmmaker really wants, and we figure out the logistics of it. He's happy with it, and it's up on screen, and it showcases New York City, and it showcases to other filmmakers what our office can accomplish with proper lead time, and that's really rewarding. And we have so many shows that take place in Washington, D.C. We're going to have another one that takes place in Boston. You can find all these locations within New York City, and we're pretty proud of all the shows that do film here, create the jobs here, that don't necessarily take place in New York
So
City.
you mean when I'm watching Madam Secretary, that's all in New York? They're not going all over the world?
No. And they find those locations.
The
where you
White
guys
House
are,
is
too.
in Westchester County.
Yeah.
It's at a golf club. We've got lots of other Washington D.C. locations in Westchester too.
I remember the first season they wanted to do something in Afghanistan, but they needed to find something close to the stage. So we helped them figure out Kingsland Avenue, right by the stage, how we can control it, where they can bring in their set dressing and create Afghanistan, or maybe it wasn't Afghanistan, it was something, and it was right outside their stage, and we figured that out.
Very cool. Deborah?
Well, I think the hardest thing is finding an impossible location that we may even have found for them, or they've found, but an area that perhaps doesn't want them there. And that could be because they have so much filming that maybe they've limited the days, or they want to shoot overnight, but it's, again, that's an affluent area that, like, I don't pay all these taxes, so somebody keep me up at night. So then you find another area that'll substitute, but, or if they have their heart set on something that just isn't available, they don't want it available, they don't want filming. Luckily, that's in very few cases, but it does happen. The most rewarding is saving a production that maybe was somewhere else, and they lost their location last minute, and we're able to find something for them. That's probably, for me, the most rewarding, because then, you feel like the hero for 5 minutes, so it's kind of nice.
Barry?
I don't think it's the same scene that David was talking about, but we recently had a television production that was looking to do a very brief scene that was supposed to take place at a forward operating base in Iraq or Afghanistan. And so they were looking for a somewhat desolate patch where they could, set up a couple of tents and a couple of military vehicles and get their 2 minutes of cutaway film for that. And we agonized over, sort of an all points bulletin to our county government and some of our local government people with, have you got a spot, a maintenance yard that's got, big piles of sand or something. We finally located a couple of spots for them. One was at the airport. One was a landfill that had been capped, that had been used for ash from an incinerator years ago, so there wasn't much growing on it. And so we sort of gathered a portfolio of these locations and sent it off to the production. They were very thankful for it, and instead they decided to shoot in New Jersey. So I told my staff the good news was that we really pulled together as a team and found some places for them. The better news was New Jersey looks more like Afghanistan than Westchester does.
Well, you got to try to keep the shoot in your state. This is for David. David, what is your role in the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and has your experience working in production helped you with your work in the Mayor's office?
So I have a team I supervise our field representatives, and we go out and check on compliance of the permit, make sure everything is safe, and hopefully our office will not receive any complaints from the shoot, and thereby maintaining a film-friendly neighborhood. So that's it, and that's what my purpose is. I don't want any complaints coming into our office. And I worked in the locations department as a location assistant location manager for a few years prior to joining the Mayor's Film Office in 1999. And because I know how scouting works, I know how the trucks need to park, how the lighting positions need to be. Like Barry said, they come in and ask for ideas about where they can find this stuff, and I have an idea of which streets would be suitable given the parking regulations on that street, where they can do their scene and still have room to park their vehicles. So I know what's required, I know how long scenes take, and I know if they're lying to me, like they need to hold this parking for more vehicles, I said, no, you don't. The camera's never gonna look that way. And so.
Great observation. Parking, and is the camera going to be looking in that direction? Something young filmmakers need to think about. Vanilla Sky, the movie Vanilla Sky, directed by Cameron Crowe and starring Tom Cruise. David, can you set up this clip and discuss later the logistical hurdles, the creative decisions to shoot in Manhattan, and the challenges on this movie?
So I wasn't here for their production meeting, but I hear Tom Cruise came into our office. So this is the big scene in the film that happens in the beginning, where he drives his car into the middle of Times Square and it's all empty. So the logistics of that, how do you do that? What date can we allow them to do this? What time period can we allow them to do this? And what the locations department had to go through to prep this. So I think the first meeting with Tom Cruise, he probably came in about 6 months before this scene to talk about, and the locations department talked about what businesses are there and what would be affected. And then with our deputy commissioner and commissioner, we decided this scene can only be done Sunday morning. We'll give you from 6 to 10 a.m. to do your wider shots. And then after that, you can do tighter shots for the rest of the day if you want. So based on what they told us, what their needs are, the meeting, we figured out the logistics. So for the production, I think they had to hire maybe 40 additional PAs, maybe, I don't know, probably 40 more traffic agents to control the traffic. And we had to determine which points at where to place the traffic agents, because Times Square, it's Times Square, 7th Avenue, Broadway, at whatever streets they need to control. But the traffic needed to be controlled from 6th Avenue down to 8th Avenue to prevent cars coming in this way. So it was all this logistics. Locations had to figure out what businesses needed on Sunday at 6 to 10 a.m. I remember they closed down. They bought out the Howard Johnson's. There used to be a Howard Johnson's in Times Square. I think they closed that down, and then they bought out the McDonald's. I might be totally mistaken, but they bought out the McDonald's and said, whoever wants breakfast, you got to go. Everybody can go over there, because I think the scene takes place on the side of the street where the Howard Johnson's was. So they had to close all this down. So there's a lot of work from the locations department. But this is an example of the rewards. You see this scene on TV, and people are still talking about how in the world did you do this. So.
Okay, so we're going to roll in now, Vanilla Sky.
So I think in the beginning part was done on a different day, and then that part where he drives in, that's the Sunday morning part, and then the part where he's just spinning around and more close up of him, that was done after 10 a.m. So what did that scene take? Like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and the logistics of that, and the money they must have had to spend to get that.
And there's people
done.
still talking about it.
Still talking about it, and that's one of our talking points. We say, we'll try to figure out everything for you. Just take a look at Vanilla Sky and what our office can do with the help of NYPD and the talent of the locations department. So we say, we'll help you try to do everything you want.
Very cool. And boy, the streets look so clean.
You know,
It was like after so clean after New Year's
yeah.
Eve, you know?
I should ask the locations department about that, whether they had to have sanitation come in to clean the streets prior
Sure
to
they
this.
did.
We're going to take our first virtual question coming in. Yes, and introduce the caller, and introduce yourself,
Hi,
please.
I'm Jazz. So this first question is from Kevin at Hostels Community College. It's for everyone on the panel. During the 1970s, local communities shut down filming for the production of Fort Apache, The Bronx, because the film depicted lawlessness, violence, and all of that in the South. Does your office recommend script changes to the production, companies, and recommendations not to shoot in certain neighborhoods?
Let's start with Barry. We'll go.
We believe very strongly in the First Amendment and the creative freedom of filmmakers. So as long as what you're shooting is not pornographic or blatantly libelous, we're most likely going to let you shoot, and frankly, I don't want to read your script.
Deborah?
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't want to read anyone's script either. We agree with that. There's just not time. But you know, they'll tell us what we want. We'll try. If they want something that's blatantly going to be a big deal somewhere in in an area, we'll try and find a more secluded area to do it. And no, not pornography. We won't get into that. But we'll just try to find something that works somewhere else in a little less sensitive area. When we get to my clip later, I'll discuss all the logistics going into the blacklist and burning up, blowing up bridges and falling off and all kinds of things. But we'll try to, you'll tell us what you want it to look like, and we'll try and find the area for you to do that.
David?
So we don't want to read scripts either, and we can't censor the material. I don't know what caused that incident to happen, but we are
It's like riots.
well, then that might have been closed down for safety issues then from NYPD, and not because of the script and what they were shooting.
Jeff, can I just,
Yes,
one more
please.
point on that? The one thing we will get involved in is if you're using any identifiable county or town, village, city property, we might say that it has to be rendered as nondescript. So for example, we very recently had a scripted television show filming at the Playland Amusement Park in Rye, New York. And they had a scene that involved finding a murder victim on a roller coaster. Well, we let them shoot on our roller coaster, but we did not let them identify it as the Dragon Coaster or as being at Playland Park.
Okay.
So I have another question for everyone. What is the, I know you talked about this briefly, but what is the strangest location request that presented the most challenges? And we'll start with Barry.
Well, certainly forward operating base in Iraq was probably the most recent difficult one. We specialize in difficult locations. I mean, clearly many large productions are based here in New York City, and it's their preference to be as close to their studios and their production offices as they can be because it's time consuming and expensive to move productions around. So we get a lot of routine shooting. We'll get a big chunk of time on a movie we'll show you a little bit of later. But they come to us when they need a jail, a prison, an airport, locations that are frankly much harder to clear for shooting in the city, and I'm sure that's Nassau's experience too. So I'd like to say, they're all difficult, but they're all fun, and it is. You asked earlier about what's great about the job, and part of it is solving these problems for people and getting to see people advance their creative work with our help.
Deborah?
The most difficult would be the Blacklist shoot, which I'll talk about later, but there was another kind of funky one. There was a series called Babylon Fields, which was on for about 2 months, and I think they even did or tried to do a remake, which didn't happen, but they needed a graveyard for zombies to come out of, and while we found them a graveyard, we couldn't actually have them start digging up holes and whatnot since there's bodies there. But so we had the graveyard, but then we also had an area in Freeport that was being torn down, the Brooklyn Waterworks. And so they had to kind of double it in a way that if anything was coming out of the dirt, that's what it was coming out of, so that we didn't, because you actually can, we do have graveyards you can film at in Nassau, but we couldn't have them dig up their relatives, so.
Okay. David?
Well, all these scenes from Madam Secretary are pretty complicated, but I think you guys bear the brunt of it more now. They're used to going out to your properties now. I remember a car commercial that needed to film in Dumbo. This was before 9/11, and they needed to make it look like a desert or something happened or something. So they trucked in I don't know how many tons of sand and filled up either Water Street or whatever street. That was quite the logistics kind of issue for us. But besides that, there's so many shows now that are period, and I think that's difficult. Like there's a show called The Deuce that takes place in 1970s Times Square, which Times Square doesn't look like that. We found a place for them that could be like Times Square in the 1970s, and it's up to the locations department to dress it all and that. So I think the more difficult parts now are all the period pieces that need to film here.
Yeah. The marvelous Miss Maisel.
Yeah, and
That
that
must
was
be
that
a
one
great
scene in
challenge, yeah.
the first season where they looked down the garment district, and it was like they took over the whole street and filled it up with their garment trucks and all these maybe
1955 cars. Yeah.
hundreds of extras in their wardrobe. It was a really great looking scene.
I understand they just reopened the Carnegie Deli for 1 week.
Yeah.
It's great when you get to get a pastrami sandwich for 99 cents.
And explosions are difficult.
Always explosions. This is for everyone. David, we're going to start with you. What kind of resources can you offer filmmakers, and specifically student filmmakers? Anything that they need to know?
Well, I was a location scout years ago, but so I can offer some advice about how to scout for locations. And because I go to sets, I could see what's out there, what can play for something, which parks are friendlier to film in, what neighborhoods are friendlier to film in. So that's what I can offer you. For our office, for student filmmakers in particular, if you're using your school's insurance, on weekdays, in the residential areas, we only allow you to film up until 11 p.m. And if you need police assistance, it's basically weekday only up until 11 p.m. If you're in a commercial industrial area, we can permit you up till midnight. So I often get calls from student filmmakers, and I say, you know, do you really need to do it here? If you do it this way, you may not need a permit from us. So I know the $300 processing fee that we offer may be a little bit not in your budget. So I try to find places for you where you can go and maybe not need a permit.
Do they meet with you, or do you do this over the phone?
I've met with film students who can come in, but I can talk to them over the phone.
Deborah, in your office?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, I think we're getting into later about what we can definitely recommend to them or not recommend to them, but, and a lot of that comes in the form of when you write your script, what you should include, what you shouldn't include, but, you know, we can try and we have sometimes a $100 permit fee for students, as long as you're not, we don't need anybody to supervise you, you're not in an area that's going to bother anybody. You know, there's a whole bunch of ifs, ands, and buts there, but, you know, mostly the public parks are the easiest. You know, mansions and things like that aren't going to fly because we have to have people come in and supervise and whatnot, which again, I'll get more into that. But basically, you'll give us your information, we'll see what we can find for you. We always recommend, which I'll mention again later, is friends and family. Write something you can film at for free, you know.
Barry?
Yeah,
Your office?
filming for free is a good idea. I will say, as you're putting together a budget for your production, you need to think about, as you're setting up your locations in your mind, there are going to be 4 components to your filming expense. There's going to be the direct expenses that you incur. There's going to, you know, for equipment rental and, you know, set decoration and costumes, makeup, hair, whatever you're paying for. There's going to be a permit fee, which in some cases, as a student, you may be able to get waived. You get a reduced fee, as I said, $75 in Westchester. It sounds like it's $100 in Nassau. There's going to be rental fees for locations that are not publicly owned. So you want to film at a mansion. That mansion may be in a public park, and you may be able to use the exterior without a rental fee. But many houses are privately owned. They're museums. They're going to want some consideration for the use of their facility, the time, the disruption to their regular visitors, et cetera. And finally, any unanticipated or anticipated direct expenses. So if you're filming on a county property and you're using guns, or you're having people in police or military uniforms, you're going to have a police officer there. And unlike in New York City, you're going to have to pay to have that police officer there. We've had productions, not student productions per se, that have been using trails, and they needed to run a dolly track down the trail, and so they needed some gravel filled in a low spot in the trail. We had to charge them for the gravel. So think about that when you're putting your budget together. Come to us, because we can help you think about that, because we do it every day.
Gravel is not cheap.
Well, actually, gravel's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Wood chips are cheaper.
The next clip we're about to see is a promo for the first season of The Blacklist, starring James Spader. Deborah, can you tell us a little about your experience working on this series?
Well, this was the very pilot of it. I worked with a scout that I've worked with a long time before. Okay, I got something that's going to top everything you've ever done before with us, and it did, because it would change what he wanted. First he said, well, we have to use a bridge. That's always problematic, but possible, we do it. Okay, we have to shoot in a bridge. It's a month after Superstorm Sandy, so everybody's freaked out and their houses are kind of all a mess. So this is in Long Beach, and they won't close off the bridge. So and then we have to like explode things. I'm like, oh, right, okay. As you know, the time goes on. Well, then we also need people to like come out of helicopters. I'm like, oh my God. And this got bigger and bigger and bigger. So basically, this clip will, you know, we'll show you some of what we did, and then I'll discuss how we did it.
Okay, so let's roll The Blacklist.
Must be good to be home again, sir. Oh, we'll see about that. Good afternoon. I'm here to see Assistant Director Harold Cooper. Tell him it's Raymond Reddington.
It really is him.
You must have many questions. So let's begin with the most important one. Why I'm here.
He's gone.
He's on the move, heading westbound.
Zamani wants more than the general's daughter.
Where are you?
My friend, he's on his way.
Can you stop the bomb?
You're brave, girl. Ужасно!
Wait, what are you doing?
Спасибо, наслаждайся!
Daddy!
You're gonna make a great team. Well, this was fun. Let's do it again. Understand Zamani was only the first. The first what? Name on the list.
Almost none of that was us. Anyway, if you had seen the pilot of The Blacklist, basically what happens is the part where you see her talking to the daughter, they're driving over the bridge, a car comes in front of them, crashes that car, and it's meant to be on purpose because they want to kidnap the daughter. And when that happens, they start blowing things up on the bridge. Then helicopters were hovering overhead, and they were rappelling people onto the bridge. And then they had to drive people into the water. So we had to get the approval of, I think it was 15 different agencies to make this happen in 1 month. There was the film office, the county executive office, the Nassau County Police Department, the Department of Public Works, the Department of Bridges. I'm sure there were a couple other departments in there. We also had to get the approval of the City of Long Beach and the Village of Island Park, because if we were closing off most of Long Beach, and for most of the day, one of the lanes was open, they were going to have to use the Island Park Bridge. We also had to get all the news involved because this was 1 month after Superstorm Sandy, and if they would have heard explosions, people would have freaked. So we sort of had to let them know something would be happening. It was okay, but we couldn't tell you what it was. We had to speak to the Coast Guard for when people were going in the water, the Marine Bureau for when people were going in the water, the Aviation Bureau for when the helicopters were coming, arson squad, bomb squad. I'm sure there were others. And then part of the problem was we're all sitting in this huge room and nobody wanted to throw their hat in first. It was just sort of like, well, if they say it's okay, we'll do it. Well, we're not going to do it until they say it's okay. And so we had this going around for a week, and I'm going, this is just ridiculous. So I don't really have the authority to do this. I said, it's fine. Everybody threw their hats in, including the county executive, including whatever. And we ended up pulling off within 1 month, no hitches whatsoever. They rented parking lots where they needed to. They also, I mean, it's a tremendous amount of money for this 2 days we did over a weekend of filming. And you know, it did go off without a hitch. I stayed off. They said, come on, I'm not going to set. If there's any problems, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to be the one to yell at. But it, you know, really went well. There was no problem there, but everybody was just, you know, well, what if they scratch the bridge? It's like, really? You know, I mean, there were all these concerns that you had to, you know, work out with everybody.
It's great seeing James Spader. I mean, I've been a fan of James Spader since Steve Sonnenberg's Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And it's great to see him on this series. Well, we have another question coming in, another virtual question. Jazz, could you please introduce the question?
This question is from Monica at Fordham University for everyone on the panel. If I was working in an internship position in one of your offices, do you think it would benefit me in my quest to become a producer in the film and television industry? Also, are any one of you offering a paid student credited internship?
Let's start with David.
So we haven't had interns in our office for a few years now, ever since our online permit started. We used to have interns.
Yeah, our
take
last
care.
student was Natalie Sotouk.
Yes, yeah, yeah, she was an intern, and you know the interns would greet the customers who come in and help them the process, take them to the computers where they could type up the permit. Now people can do it at home, and we don't need that. But as far as becoming a producer, your path, if you were an intern with us, your path is how you choose it to be in your contacts that you made. I could tell you that There is a DGA first AD now who used to be an intern with our office, a DGA location manager. There are people in the electrics department, the props department. So, you know, they found their niche from our office, trying to meeting people who are walking into our office. Like, again, they don't come into our office anymore, so I don't know how that would be. But anyway, we don't offer paid internships.
Deborah?
Yeah, we don't offer paid internships. We will occasionally have non-paid internships for college credit and whatnot. Knowledge is always helpful. And I had one intern, Michelle, that had been with me for like 3 years, but she worked full time, but she didn't work on Mondays. Every Monday she was in that office. It was amazing. She was great. And until she got a different job. But she wanted to get more into the industry, and there was a filmmaker, pretty high-level independent filmmaker, who was doing a film where he'd be shooting at night, and he'd be shooting Edie Falco was in his film. It was Eric Mendelsohn. He had Edie Falco, Bob Dishy. I don't know. There were like 20 different older stars in it. And I had called him up because I knew she really wanted to get involved. I'm like, Eric, do you have any jobs available? Because she'd love to be part of it. And he said, well, I just have a couple of small ones, but if she knows about permitting and in general, I'll take her. And she was one of the few paid people that weren't doing him a favor that got on the job. And once it was over, she slept for about 6 weeks because it was all night filming. And afterwards, she said that was the most amazing, and it was Ann Meara was in it, Jerry Stiller, I think. Yeah, she said it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, and I know I don't want to be in this industry. I don't want to, I'm exhausted, I'm beat up, this is what your life is. And she really, couldn't do it. But there are people who have been in the office when a job comes in from somewhere, and I'll just go over to my intern. I'm like, you're like a great intern, and I'll look at it and go, I get hired right in the spot, because people want people. Anything in this industry is going to be helpful. Because I know as a filmmaker, if I have to get a permit, what I have to do, it's never a question like, okay, first thing, call the town, call the village, call the whatever, find out what else. And knowing things is always, always positive. And if you can get college credit for it, even better.
Barry?
All good. We don't have paid internships either. Sorry, we barely have any staff. I'd love to have interns, but I'll say any experience is good experience. I think the best experience is on set or in the production office, if that's where your career path is leading for you. We're helpful and supportive, but nothing beats being really hands-on on a television or film production.
So I have another question for all of you. Students are always looking for low cost or free locations. Can local film offices help with their request? And David, we'll start with you.
Like Deborah said, parks are your friend, sidewalks are your friend. As I was walking to this campus, I thought how many great looks there are on this campus, and that could be an inspiration for you. You could write for what you know and what you probably could get for free. As far as low cost, we can't speak for private locations, and probably because there's so much work in New York City and so much, they're used to getting so much money from the big TV shows and movies, it's probably going to be very difficult for you to find cheap mansions or restaurants or anything like that. But like Deborah said, your friends, sometimes I think if you're looking for an apartment, maybe you could, cheat a hotel. That would be cheaper. I mean, I don't know how much a hotel costs a night here, $400 or something, which might be still expensive. But I think if you could write towards what you could get cheap versus the other way around, which is maybe not to your creativity, but it would help you.
Deborah?
Yeah, you have to be realistic. And actually I got that term from Rob Macho, because he was doing a short film.
The Karate Kid?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was doing a short film, but he was paying for it totally out of pocket. I think it was the first time he directed. It was called Love Thy Brother, great little short film, but he didn't want to pay a lot of money for it. So I called up a location scout at the time who wasn't too ridiculous, and I just said, look, he'll take pictures with the family, he'll do whatever, and he ended up getting a house but he had to go to like a kid's birthday party. But, there was a way to get, but he said it's friends and family here. I don't want to pay anything for this, So, and I always tell student filmmakers, right? You know, I can't tell you how many of my films I've done at my house where I have to get a new couch because everybody knows this freaking red couch. But you know, you do with what you have. You know, you speak to your friends. What does their parent own? They own a gym. Great. We can include a scene there that has this. I know it may, you know, insult some people's artistic integrity, but you have to be realistic. And you can't write things for the prison because you cannot walk in the prison for less than $1,000 if you're there for like an hour. You know, I mean, you just can't. And it's probably going to be more than that. Yeah. You know, in the old days, when, you know, in the way old days when I first started, you could film inside a mansion for 3 days for nothing, and you can't anymore. Now you need somebody in there with you. You even have to get approval, you know, and we don't even run this certain mansion anymore anyway. And police cost. So if you're going to write something with guns and you know, weapons of any sort, or uniforms, or a police car, you're going to have to pay them. Supervise, each officer gets, I think, like $95 an hour. So, you know, you really need to be really careful about that.
Barry?
I don't really think I have much to add to what my fellow panelists said. The creative freedom is also a creative challenge, and that's how do you find things that can look like the essential elements to your story. And that's a challenge to you as a producer, director, set designer, even a location scout. How can I make A into B when B is really what I need?
Well, that is a good segue into the next clip we're about to see from the movie The Girl on the Train, directed by Tate Taylor. Barry, can you set up the clip?
So this clip has a bunch of scenes that were filmed in the Westchester Hudson River towns, Irvington, Dobbs Ferry, and just to the point I was making about making A into B, the police station scenes here took place, I believe, in 2 different buildings. One was a village library, and the other was the village hall, because they couldn't use a police station. And I don't think, had I not told you that, you would have had any idea, because the filmmakers did a wonderful job of convincing us that this was the place it was to be. I think you'll also see why people come to Westchester County to film, because you'll see a little bit of how beautiful it is too.
Okay, so let's roll the clip for The Girl on a Train.
You have an accent.
Pardon?
No, sorry, I wasn't expecting you to have an accent.
Well, you have an accent.
Where are you from? I need to file a statement.
Name?
Rachel Watson.
Pete? I got this.
Okay, wow. Barry, want to talk a little bit about the clip we just
I wasn't
saw?
actually involved in the work on that film. It came out even before I started with the office, but it shot at dozens of locations all over Westchester County. And I think the challenge for the filmmakers in that case was that the book they were adapting was set in England. So once they made the decision to move the story to the United States, they had a little bit of flexibility. And to Deborah's advice, I think part of their creative process was not just where do we want this to be, but where can we shoot this in a very authentic and credible way. And that was how they came to using the Hudson Line of Metro North and Amtrak along the western shores of Westchester.
Okay. So we have a question from our studio audience. Please raise your hand and tell us your name. Yes, please.
Hey, my name is Joseph. Thank you for coming. I have a question for all of you guys. If it's brought to your attention that a young filmmaker lives in a community where a feature film or a television show is being made, would you recommend a film student to be a location scout for a film or for a TV production?
Anyone want to jump in
Yeah,
on
they
that?
come with their own location staffs. You're talking about a big one. They've already got their people hired before they even start. If they do ask for PAs, Sandler had done a movie called The Week Of, a series I think it was, and they needed PAs. So we recommended 3 of our own interns and a couple of other people, and 2 of them they loved and kept throughout the whole summer, and a couple that let go right away. So if it's something like that lower end stuff, we will. But as far as large companies with productions, with location scouts, they have their own people hired, and there's a union, and they're in the union.
Okay.
I will say, if any of you live in Washington Heights, I hear a certain very popular Broadway musical that you can't get tickets for months in advance, written by somebody from Washington Heights, is going to be making a movie version of it very soon and wants to hire local people. So keep an eye out for Lin-Manuel.
You know, just to add, when I was a young filmmaker, I used to hang out at the Bronx Council on the Arts. And Phil Caruso, the production manager for The Wanderers, which is a Phil Kaufman film written by Richard Price, they asked for someone who knew alleyways and streets in the Bronx, and I raised my hand. And I became a location scout on that film. I actually used some of my best alleyways in the Bronx. So, you know, if you're affiliated with an arts council, not a bad idea to let them know you're available for location scouting in your own community. We have another question from the studio audience. Yes, please tell us your name before you ask the question.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jose Gomez, and it's a pleasure to have you all. My question is for David Moore. Well, I'm planning to shoot a scene for my student film in a new New York City housing project and at the City Hall station on the IRT number 4 line. So my question is, can your office help me to get a permit, or do I need to seek out separate permits for this location from other agencies?
So 2 things with the City Hall subway stop. It's not a real stop anymore. So MTA is not going to let you film in there. No one can film in there, except maybe documentaries that involve the subway. So that's the second point. Is the MTA is actually state property and not city property. So to film on any subways, platforms, whatever, you need to have MTA permission. So the housing project is New York City, and we can give you a contact for all the NYCHA properties there. Are you looking to film just on the sidewalk or in an apartment or within a complex? Because if you're just on the sidewalk opposite it, then it's just us. If you're on, but it has to be opposite it. Like if it's on their side of the sidewalk on their property, then you need permission from them. Unless you're just using a handheld camera or a camera on a tripod and you're not exerting exclusive use, because then you're just on a city sidewalk at this point.
But the New York City Housing Authority has their own permit?
Yes, well, no, it doesn't. There's a film contact, a film liaison.
Okay.
Each agency has some sort of film liaison that we can point them to, filmmakers to. And if you need a permit from us, when you write our permit, you'll say permission granted by so-and-so from NYCHA.
Do we have another question from the studio audience? Anyone else? Yes, okay. Please say your name and take the microphone.
Hi, hello. My name is Nairi, and this question is for all of you guys. Does each of your offices have a website of the best locations to use for student films that are free? And also, if I find a great location and send you pictures, would you post them on your website for other students to see?
Barry, you want to?
Yeah, so the Westchester Film Office maintains an account on Flickr. If you go to Flickr and search Westchester County Film Locations, you'll find it, and we've got albums of all sorts of different locations, many of them county property, which would be subject to our reduced student fees. You can't tell from the pictures necessarily whether they're free or public or expensive, private, not, but it's a great place to start. We've got something like 3,500 images there. The state, the governor's film office, also maintains an account which scrapes all of our photos and those from other film offices around the state too. So they have kind of the master version of that. So I would suggest, if you want to just sit in mind-numbing detail of potential locations all around the city and the region and the state, would be to start with that. And again, call us.
We have a website that does have photos of different private homes, some parks, nowhere near enough, but definitely some, but unfortunately I can't say any of them are actually free. You might be able to get some of the parks, as I said, for $100 a day. Nassau County website is nassaucountiny.gov/film, and you know, mostly it's mansions and stuff. They don't let anybody filming for free, so it's you know, unfortunate, but that's why we do the friends and family thing.
On our website, we have a photo library, but again, nothing is going to be free. So that's why we just show sidewalks and parks and some courthouses, but the courthouses require a $3,200 processing fee too. But the filming itself is actually free, but to process their paperwork, it costs money. So the reason why we can't have all these private locations, we don't have the manpower to keep up to date contacts, and that. But that's what your offices are good about, and I think the State Film Office is good for that.
Okay, before we go to the next clip, we have time for one more question from the studio audience. Yes, in the back. Could we put the mic back?
Yeah, so I'm curious. My name is Antonio Rodriguez, by the way. I'm just curious if you guys have any like favorite experiences or like memorable experiences from your careers that you'd like to share with us. Yeah.
Well, I think if I were in Times Square that day, I think I would be pretty amazed. But I'm not going to go into the city on a Sunday at 6 a.m. just to see that, though. But like when you see like an I wish I were there on that bridge, because that was a great scene. You should Google that scene and the work that had to be done in a month after Sandy too. When you see an explosion like that and all the work that came with it and it went off, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can save the day or pull off something that's impossible or really just help somebody, you know, that's pretty awesome. I mean, again, you know, you can talk about The Blacklist, Babylon Fields, getting people, I think City Island with Andy Garcia was the first film that shot at the Nassau County Correctional Center. And to get them in there was just so huge that we have finally worked that out. And it's any time where somebody's having such a problem with the village and you just have a phone call with them and it magically all works out, you know, against all odds. I mean, things like that really are, you know, what make the job worthwhile. And I think the other thing that I love about this is every day is a different experience. So it's never, you can't get bored. It's almost impossible. If you had update lists maybe, but since you're working with the scouts trying to find these things and every day is a different project, a different job, it's never boring.
Since my colleagues went big, I'll go small. I'll say that there's a lot of joy in working with a student filmmaker or a documentary filmmaker who doesn't have a budget of $150 million for a film or $20 or $30 million for a dramatic episode, but somebody who's trying to do a historical piece on the water system that serves New York City and wants to be able to film at several locations where the tunnels pass underneath Westchester County, or a student who really wants to do a film about somebody suffering trauma from their experience in the Korean War and needs to find a place where they can do a flashback scene that is, you know, 30 seconds out of a 10 or 12 minute movie, but is really critical to their story, and yet they don't have the financial resources to do it in the way that one of these bigger productions would be. So yeah, the big thrilling special effects scenes are cool and fun, but it's also very satisfying to help the little guys get their stuff done too. Yeah. And we hope you'll invite us to your premieres.
And you should. You really should. Invite everyone on the panel to your annual film festivals.
Oh, okay, I just thought of my most memorable. It's not my most memorable recent. We were helping out with Bad Education, which is a movie with Hugh Jackman about the corruption in the Roslyn school system, and I'm on set because they said, why don't you come? We're having a surprise party for you tonight. Why don't you come? I was like, all right. So me and my assistant go there, and we didn't end up staying that late, but as I'm watching everybody move around, which I love, some young man comes up to me because you're Debbie Markowitz. I know you. I had like 4 of my films. You took all 4 of my films in the film festival, because we also run the Long Island International Film Expo a few years ago, and I won, and that's great. I said, oh, that's wonderful. And he had a crew pass on like I did. I said, well, what are you doing? He goes, I'm the writer. I'm like, what? He goes, you know, I wrote it. I'm like, he's 27 years old. He wrote this movie story, and he's a producer because apparently he had some source material. And I'm sitting there going, So I said, well, what else have you done? He goes, well, I did this movie with Peter Dinklage, and I'm like looking at him like, who are you? And he's just this kid from Roslyn that just decided to go to California and get a job, and with his friends find out, all right, what free locations can we get? And we're going to make films based on that, and they were all amazing. Everyone was amazing and different, and he's directing movies. I'm not directing, but he's writing movies with Hugh Jackman in them. And
well, this is a great segue into the next clip, because the next clip is we're about to see is from the movie Meet Joe Black, and it was directed by Martin Brest. And on a side note, Marty Brest grew up in the Bronx on Pelham Parkway, and also wrote and directed the 1979 film Going in Style, which was shot on this campus of Bronx Community College. So David, can you set up the clip we're about to see?
So I was a location assistant at this point. It's the scene where Brad Pitt gets hit by two cars going this way. And yeah, I just remember working on that day and prepping that location. I remember there was some guy had to move off, he had his moving truck come on that street for that day. And what our locations department did was we had him park on the other side on Lexington Avenue, and I had to help him move couches downstairs. I said, this is a really difficult angle of the stairwell. How am I going to do it? But that's a job of a locations person. You got to make it. You got to make the day work. All that prep work to talk to the restaurants that are on 14th Street, because unlike Times Square, it's 6 a.m. Still, things are still going on 14th Street, but I was also there when they were rehearsing this scene, so we had to find a parking lot in an armory in Teaneck, New Jersey, so they could test what the speed of both cars should be, how the breakaway glass will break, and how to hoist the dummy up. It was a dummy, not even an actor, up on a crane to simulate the hit. So there was a lot of work.
So take your gloves if you get a job as a location manager.
You gotta
Keep
move
them in your
furniture.
back pocket. So let's now roll the clip for Meet Joe Black, directed by our very own Bronxite, Marty Brest.
Oh boy, okay. Now I gotta go, so.
Yeah, understood.
Okay, all right.
Fair enough. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Do not text. Do not do any text while crossing the street.
Well,
okay?
this was 1997,
Right.
so I don't know.
That wasn't a problem.
Problem anyway. But yeah, I mean, it started on Lexington Avenue. This was 14th Street. So in the parking lot of the Teaneck Armory, they had to, test the speed of the car, how it works, because it takes place in the intersection too. So the holding of this traffic was pretty immense too. Not like in Times Square, but it was a dummy that they had on a crane and a cable, and it hit both ways. And I forget how many times they did it that day, but I don't think they did it more than twice that day.
It's expensive to get a Brad Pitt dummy.
Yeah.
Not as expensive as getting Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt, right.
But that for me, that was my big first stunt scene. So that was quite exciting for me, except that I had to be moving couches in the morning during this time.
So this is probably the last question. we have a lot of film students in the audience who are doing their thesis films. And this was discussed yesterday, but what should you not do when writing your senior thesis regarding using locations? And we're going to start first with Deborah.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything that I said before. Don't write it in a mansion unless your family owns a mansion. Don't write it in the jail. Don't write it including police uniforms or guns, because you know, there's in Nassau County, as I suppose anywhere, there's 5 million officers and off-duty police officers, and the last thing you want to do is see somebody pulling a gun when they may not see the rest of what's happening. And you just have to be careful with all that stuff. Don't write anything expensive. I mean, we understand your students, we understand you don't have the money, you know, but you gotta understand we're a 1 or 2 person office with a whole neighborhood and whatever that's trying to make money off of film production. So they're not, you're not the first student to come, you're the 13,000th student to come. So it's, at that point, they don't even really entertain it. You know, it's sad, but it kind of is what it is. When we did student permits for free, we would just have like 10, 15 a day, and we couldn't, you know, you got to work on the big jobs that are bringing in the money, so it became very difficult, and that's why they actually started charging anything, was just to try to at least, you know, if you have nothing, we can't help you. But it's so don't write anything that's going to have expensive locations, you know, just write stuff that you can write in your house, your friends' houses, your family's businesses, whatever you can write, and you'd be surprised, and I think the biggest thing is be flexible. You'd be surprised, not saying you shouldn't change your entire script, but just a movie I had done. We were supposed to film it on somebody's boat, and then there was a holdup, and then it was getting too cold, and then the insurance was too much. It's like, you know what? So we just added a line where he says, you know what? I know you do. He has his girlfriend put her hands up her eyes, and he's leading her in the backyard going, I know you don't have any time, and you really want to work, so look what I did. And he had a picnic in the backyard. And everything happened in the backyard, because that's what we could afford, that's what we could do, and that's in our time frame.
That's it, right. You're right what you could afford.
Yeah,
Barry?
so that's it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Flexibility is critical. I can get you a reduced fee in my park on a Friday, maybe not on a Saturday because it's full of thousands of people. You need to be able to shoot on a Friday. I will say, you'll always hear people telling you that this business is all about relationships. That's absolutely, totally true. And realize that the reason we are able to work with you and help you is because we've been doing this with lots of other people, and you're paying it forward with your respect and your flexibility and your engagement and your politeness, quite frankly. And so if you reach out to us about a location, follow up. We send you a permit, sign it and send it back, or tell us you're not going to and tell us why. We actually care. And part of what keeps us going is the interaction with you and the excitement we have in the creative work you're doing and are going to do, and realize you're building a relationship every time you work on a project, whether it's your senior thesis or your first PA job out of school or your job as a second deputy assistant location coordinator on another project. So always bear in mind that somehow you're paying it forward, and you're able to be there because somebody else paid it forward for you months, even years before.
David?
So I think I know it's your senior thesis, and I know probably Professor Wasowski is expecting big things from you, but I think as a filmmaker, you have so many ideas. So if the first idea that you want to make, so if the first idea you find is costing too much, go to your second, third idea, and like my colleagues here say, just write for what is available to you and try to fit that. And I know you want to make the big picture. You want Brad Pitt to get hit by a car, but that's...
Yeah, look, Godzilla on the George Washington Bridge is for your next film.
Yes.
Okay.
This is your senior thesis. Make it good, get known from it, then you get the money.
Yeah, our students are very clever, and you'll see at this year's film festival, some of the locations are very unique, and they make the best out of them. Well, our time has come to an end, and we'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for taking the time to talk to us today, and what an insightful conversation this was. I'd also like to thank the New York Governor's Office of Motion Picture and Television Development, the New York Production Alliance, the New York Film and Television Student Alliance, and our studio TV crew from the Media and Digital Film Club here at Bronx Community College. See you next time on Open Doors.